Alright guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to day 6 of the month of metal. Today I am painting this River Troll, originally released in 1993 and sculpted by Mike Perry. I'm starting off here with Raging Sea from the Army Painter. It's a speed paint and I'm just applying this all over the skin. I'm going to cover all of the skin and some of the fur and all of the scales as well with this. Um, I'm going to put more colors over the fur and the scales later, but just to start off, to make sure all the primer is covered, I'm going to put this Raging Sea all over it. This miniature was primed first with Pale Sage from Krylon, and then followed up with a light zenithal dusting with matte clamshell from Krylon. Then after that was dry, I moved on to Pterodon Turquoise, and I used that for the fur. I did a good amount of experimentation with these 4 colors. I actually painted the colors straight onto my notebook that I take all my notes with. And that was Raging Sea, Pterodon Turquoise, Eldari Emerald, and the other one. Some other color, which I didn't end up using, so it's fine. But I painted those 4 colors directly on my notebook and kind of looked at them and tried to decide which 3 were going to look best together. And ultimately I came up with this darker Pterodon Turquoise for the fur, and then Eldari Emerald later for the scales. And these colors are all pretty similar, but still different enough that I think it gives a cool result in the end. Then I moved on to base coating the scales to get them ready for the Eldari Emerald that's coming sooner, or down the line rather, later. And that's just plate mail metal, and I just painted in back over the scales. When Mike Perry sculpted this, he did an excellent job of defining regions of scales, not making the skin overly busy, but also giving you enough that you feel like you can get some real visual interest out of painting them, which I think is great. Then, while I was waiting for the silver to finish drying, I took some Magmadroth Flame and went over the 2 fish that he has attached to his belt here. I went with this just because, goldfish. I thought that would be fun. And it'll also pop very nicely against the basically completely blue or greenish blue skin of this guy. Then, once my silver was all nice and dry, I moved on to Eldari Emerald and just covered all my silver, basically. If it bled over a little bit onto the skin, that's fine. It'll just look like a little bit of blending. So it'll work in my favor, to be honest. This Eldari Emerald over silver is quickly becoming one of my favorite combinations. Some of the first miniatures I ever painted as a kid were plastic 1/72 scale knights, and I used on them a paint that was from a craft store like Michael's or something. That was this very vibrant metallic green. It was one of my favorite colors ever, and I don't know where that paint bottle is, probably long dried up, but this combination of the Eldari Emerald over the silver reminded me of that, and so I think I'm going to start using this combination on more projects in the future. Then I just took a little bit of Turquoise Siren and painted in the warts on this guy. He's got a couple of warts on his face. I actually thought he had more, but then looking around, I realized that none of these other bumps were actually warts. They were like shells that have attached to him. So got some more paint on my brush here, looked around, and realized I was actually done. Then for these shells, I used some Ferocious Green. It's a pretty pale green. I think it looked pretty good for a shell color, and also gives us a little bit of a pop color against this darker blue skin. Not as crazy as the orange fish, but still some visual interest that'll be nice in the finished piece. Then I took some obsidian skin and just base coated the teeth and the claws with this. I'm going to do a total of 3 colors on these. Just kind of doing the classic, like, paint the entire thing with one color, then 3/4 of the thing with another color, and then 50% of the thing with the third color. It's not a super high fidelity paint job, but from 3 feet away, I think it looks great. Then while I was waiting for that to dry, I took some fur brown and did the leather strap that he's carrying his fish with. Looking back on this, I think I made the wrong decision with this color. It's a little too orange and a little too close to the color of the fish. I probably should have picked a more true brown color, but I didn't really feel like going back over it, and once I put some washes on it and stuff, it'll look different enough. But if I were to make the decision again, I would go for a more true brown color for this. After that, I took some Cygor brown and just base coated the wood here. I completely covered this whole club, even the rope and the rocks and stuff he has embedded in it, just to cover the primer completely. I don't want any white spots peeking out later in the paint job. Then it was time for the second color on the teeth, and for this I'm using Desert Yellow. And like I said, I'm just painting 75 to 80% of each item here. So you'll still have a little bit of the obsidian skin showing underneath, but at this point they'll be mostly Desert Yellow. And then I moved on to the final teeth color, which is Tomb King's Tan, and just painted about 50% of each tooth. Then I took some Andrea Black 1. This is still this color that unfortunately I don't know the name of, but it's one of my favorite grays, or light black, or whatever you want to call it. And I just painted in the rocks that he has strung in his hair, and then the sharp rocks that he has in his club. Then I went back to my plate mail metal and just painted the rings that he has on his leather strap here. And then on to some finishing touches. I took some auger blue and just did a sort of overbrushing on the fur here. I was realizing that the model was a little too monotone. I needed something to differentiate the fur from the skin, so this lighter overbrush here will make them stand out a little bit more. Then it was time to do the eyes, and thankfully on a larger model like this, the eyes are pretty simple. You could actually go pretty crazy on these eyes. There is a decent amount of surface area here, but I just went with the super simple, base coat them in with black, and then I took some Vivid Volt, and I just did a little dot in each eye, and that was good enough for me. Then it was on to the washes. I started off with some Caraburg Crimson, and I just did this as a wash on the fish. This is ultimately how I differentiated the leather from the fish. Like I said earlier, I think they were a little too close in color, so putting this red wash on them really makes them a completely different color from the leather. Then I took some Coelia Green Shade and put it on the scales. Again, I thought this guy was a little too monotone, so put a overbrush on the fur, put a wash on the scales, and now we've got three distinct colors that I think look much better together than they did previously. And then finally, I took some Seraphim Sepia and just did a targeted wash on the skin. So in some of the recesses and on some of the flat areas, just kind of put this around. This brownish, reddish sepia wash will contrast nicely with the skin and just make him a little bit more realistic looking. It'll change some of the blue to slightly green. It'll leave some brown in the cracks and crevices, and it just makes him feel like more of a realistic object than a painted miniature. And with that, he was done. Right about now, you should be seeing him on his finished base. I decided to go with a swampy sort of base on this guy. He lives in rivers or swamps or whatever, so I thought that was appropriate. Thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you tomorrow for day 7 of the month of metal.